Hello everybody, and as ever, a very warm welcome back to the Lockdown LitFest virtual studio, where we hope you are safe, we hope you're keeping well, and we hope you're loved and loving those who you are locked down with. I have rather a special guest today, a British-born international artist. He's pioneered many forms of contemporary British sculpture, which we now take for granted, including the painted bronze, the waxwork, the recycled art historical icon, and the use of rubbish in art. His installations and sculptures deal with the issues of authorship, authenticity, and identity, and he's concerned largely with the myth of the artist and the authorship of a work. His engagement with this modernist avant-garde debate stretches back to the ready-mades, of course, of Marcel Duchamp. Back in 1991, the Royal College of Art refused him a degree on the basis that his final show, Cave, consisted of a whitewashed studio space containing only a blue heritage plaque commemorating his presence, and saying Gavin Turk worked here 1989 to 1991. Instantly gaining notoriety through this installation, Turk was spotted by Charles Saatchi and was included in several young British artist exhibitions, and subsequently his work's been collected and exhibited by many major museums and galleries throughout the world. Prestel first published his major monograph in 2013, showcasing more than 2 decades of his work, and in 2014, Trolley Books published This Is Not a Book About Gavin Turk, which playfully explores themes associated with the artist's work via 30 notable contributors. It is my great pleasure and something of a huge honor to be able to say, Gavin Turk, a very warm welcome to the Lockdown LitFest virtual studio, which features in the background one of your pieces. I'm so pleased you've come to join us. How are you, first of all, and where are you locked down?
They're very good. Luckily, I've been able to get to my studio. So I'm actually in my studio at the moment, and I've been kind of making a cycle ride from my house to my studio, which is in Canning Town. So it actually has been a bit of a godsend to be able to be here in the studio and to be able to kind of carry on working. I mean, unfortunately, in the studio, I work with quite a few other people, and they have had to stay at home or they're not here. But the studio is not that old for me. I think I've been here for just 2 years, and this is actually the first time where I've really had the whole space to myself as well. So I'm kind of I'm spoiled, really.
Are you finding it does this make it more difficult for you, or is there something of an inspiration in this extraordinary time for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously, I think for everyone, the whole thing is a sort of paradigm shift. I think we're all sort of feeling and understanding social space differently, and the relationship we have with our environment is really it's a new thing, really. I am finding it philosophically really, really interesting. I think that the whole kind of the idea of work, or the idea of a practice, also with art as well, because for me, art is definitely something that's done and something I make with an audience in mind. It's something that I kind of need. I need that audience, really. So I need that interaction. So what's happening now is I'm in a testing or a kind of experimental phase where I haven't actually got that physical audience. I haven't got that kind of way of communicating, and I think that I'm realizing more and more, actually, that actually is a fundamental part to the way I understand art.
There's something that strikes me about so much of your work, and I know you and I have talked about this at various stages in the past. There's always that, art as a response to the environment around us, but this massive change, this paradigm shift, as you say, in the social environment around us, is this opening new gateways for you, starting to think in a different way, especially if you're working in a studio that's normally buzzing with people? You must feel slightly isolated, I guess.
I think that's the point. No, I do, but it also, I suppose that there's definitely a feeling that I'm like in a new phase. I feel like I'm in a new in a new relationship to my work. And obviously this notion of context being everything, and the notion that art, as much as anything, is a kind of picture or a portrait of the moment, of now. If we go back to our cave drawings, Lascaux caves obviously are a kind of a dream or a moment or a depiction of what was happening then, or how people were able to kind of put it down.
That makes sense. Can we go back to sort of origins and the beginning part of your career? I'm just going to quickly do something because I've lost images of you, which is a bit weird. There we go. Sorry, you're back. You and I were both born in the 60s, which is an extraordinary time for music and for art, which gave rise to obviously 70s and all that happened across the 70s with the birth of punk and new forms of art in a way. What was it in your background? How did you grow up that led you to think, there is an artist's soul in me, there's an artist's mind in me, I think deeply about stuff that I see and I want to contribute or I want to express? Can you talk us through that hinge point in the career when suddenly Gavin Turk, the teenager, became Gavin Turk, the artist?
I mean, this is a question that frequently gets asked. Like, when was that moment where you decided to become an artist? And well,
I'm trying not to say that because I guess it's a process, but not a moment. I'm interested in the process.
But I think for some people, I think there definitely is a kind of there's definitely a time where they kind of see lights and have, bells ring and there's a kind of a point where they realise that they are destined to be artists. I think that I've always been a little bit of the opinion that that somehow, if I could think of a better thing to do, I'd go and do that. I mean, it was slow, really. There wasn't a particular moment. I was slow to kind of come into the relationship with art. I don't know if I ever thought it was, I mean, there wasn't really a teenage artist that had to kind of get out there and be, internationally successful or kind of show my work everywhere. I think that was, I enjoyed drawing, and I enjoyed kind of, I enjoyed making things and putting things together. I'm actually particularly fond of taking things apart. So I would, if something broke in our house, I would take it apart. I was not very good at putting it back together, but very good at taking it apart. So that the house is full of things that I'd taken apart.
What took you to Chelsea School of Art? If I'm correct in thinking, is where you started formal training. Would that be right?
Yeah, I mean, again, I did my foundation in Kingston, and at that time there was very mixed reports about what were the best art colleges. I think that I learned that Alexei Sale had gone to Chelsea and learned how to paint buses or something, and at the time I was rather interested in his views on art, on his views on life. And I went to visit various art schools, as you do, and had some great conversations with some of the artists who were working in the studio and thought, oh, this place looks good. So I put it down as a first choice and managed to get a place. And I really enjoyed being at Chelsea because the art college at that time was on Man Race Road, which was just off the King's Road. Yeah. And although I was familiar with the King's Road, I used to go there in the 70s and kind of hang out there a little bit. It was a sort of punk hangout. And then all of a sudden I was there at the art school, and it was really didn't feel like being on the King's Road. There was no sort of like fashion issue with it. There was, you know, you really felt like it was a very kind of like, yeah, really working environment. And yeah, I really enjoyed my BA 3 years there in Chelsea.
Can we bring us through to the Royal College of Art? Because I mentioned Cave, the whitewash studio space with the blue heritage plaque, which is, I mean, I still think is a fantastic piece. But of course, it led to the RCA refusing to grant you a degree. Was that? I'm intrigued in your emotional sort of response to that and how you look at it now, looking back. Because of course, for one thing, you didn't get your degree, but it really launched you. It must have felt very confusing at the time. How actually was it?
Yeah, I mean, I was shocked and surprised that I didn't get my degree. I realised in hindsight that like people had assumed that Justin Stevens, who was the then rector of the Royal College, had been appointed the head of English Heritage at that time, and no one knew about that appointment. And so he was about to leave the Royal College, and he hadn't told anyone. And then it's obviously the English Heritage that award the blue plaque. So he'd visited the sculpture department and thought that I'd found out something about his plans and that I'd made some comment about him. And so he single-handedly kind of refused to give me my award. So on some levels, it was very kind of personal, but I didn't really know anything about that. It was not something that actually I was involved in.
Right.
But at the same time, it was a really fascinating. And again, in hindsight, I realise it's a fascinating thing to do, to make a piece of art which is unacceptable. I mean, art is never. It's never that dangerous. It always seems to be kind of somehow like the most acceptable thing in the world. And you know, so here was this situation where the work I'd made sort of defined what was acceptable or not acceptable in terms of student art or student work or even just artist's work. And so that was really that break with what's acceptable, not acceptable, like that in a way was the springboard into the future. I mean, the fact that there was a certain sort of stir in the air about the work and me not getting my degree. I mean, it became a kind of there was a small media storm, and obviously the work itself more or less existed. I mean, it existed in the studio and the space, but the kind of the main catalyst for it was this blue plaque, and the blue plaque didn't really say too much. It just said Royal Borough of Kensington, Gavin Turk, sculptor, worked here 1989-91. So what it did was actually like put my name into the game, into play.
Yeah.
There wasn't much else to it. It was more like a sign or it was like an advert.
So when Charles Saatchi came knocking, were you ready for that? Was that an unexpected outcome?
Well, like pretty soon after leaving the Royal College, I ended up starting to work with a young gallerist called Jay Joplin, and who went on to open a gallery called White Cube. And basically Jay was in constant contact with Charles Saatchi and had organised the whole kind of shark piece with Damien Hirst and Charles Saatchi. It was a kind of commissioned artwork, and I finished the pop sculpture, the waxwork sculpture of me as Sid Vicious, and Charles saw it on a transparency and bought the work literally from a transparency through the gallery. So it was a strange it was a strange experience, that, because like suddenly the reality of I mean, and this is where it maybe gets quite interesting to this period of now, where we're looking at a lot of things online, or we're looking at a lot of things that are two-dimensional or visual, virtual versions of artworks. But it was very interesting that in a way, like my first major art sale was a sale from a transparency. It was the sort of like the beginning of, oh dear, what's happening here? Because I always sort of had this strong faith and hope in the physical, in the actual, in the real interaction between the audience and the object. And the fact that art, in a way, one of the great things about it was that you actually had to be in service or in presence of that thing, of that artwork, in order to see it, feel it, know what it was. I mean, all too often now, like you find you go to a museum and people rush in front of you, they get their phone out, and they take a picture of the artwork, and then they rush off. And they don't really look. They look with their phone, or they look with their heads, they look with their preconceptions.
Yeah, increasingly interesting
now.
Well, you see, but it strikes me that a lot of your work is about preconceptions anyway. As you say, a lot of it is about what most people consider to be ordinary quotidian objects: nail, brick, even the piece that we're looking at behind us, rubbish, a bag of rubbish in this diptych. In fact, can we point out that you have graciously allowed us to use one of your images, a fantastic green and pink diptych with rubbish. Can you talk us through this and what it is?
I mean, again, like I think it was year 2000, I decided that I was going to take a filled bag of, black bag filled with rubbish, cast it into bronze, and then paint it back to look like the bag filled with rubbish. And for me, it was almost like I think it's almost like my most iconic or successful work. It kind of avoids everything. It becomes the kind of the unwanted, the sort of unwanted space between, almost like the unwanted space between people, or it's almost like an anti-portrait. Yeah. And so I started making these like bin bag sculptures. I then started wondering about whether the bin bag itself might be, whether I could take that further and almost make it into a kind of signature, so that if you saw a bin bag, you might think of me. And in much the same way, I'm trying to do the same sort of thing with eggs. So now if you see an egg, you might think of me. And try to kind of almost like use the way that artists, that they almost put a signature on materials. So, for instance, when I was like kind of almost like first became aware of art, I got very focused and interested in Joseph Beuys, who is a German artist who I think is, again, like becoming possibly more interesting at the moment, because obviously he started the Green Party, planted lots of oak trees. His work was about process, the sort of like the natural processes, evolution, ecosystems. And I think that his work's going to become much more kind of looked at now. But anyway, if you see something made out of fat or felt, you go, oh, is this something by Joseph Beuys? So there was this kind of, this idea of putting a signature on materials, or the way of using materials, on a style of using materials. And I started wondering whether it was possible to kind of put a signature on objects or on concepts. So what we've got in the studio is a diptych panel painting. So it's actually two canvas panels, and in many ways it's just like a kind of colour field painting, with just like a simple play between two colours, a green colour and a red colour. which obviously vibrate and have a kind of relationship with one another. And then obviously this bag is kind of stuck in the corner, almost like as if it was not supposed to be there. The bag itself is actually, I don't know if you can see it in the picture, but the bag itself is quite an elaborate screen printed process where I actually paint loosely underneath the print and then print over the top. So it's almost like the bag itself the plastic bag is sort of trapping this moving fluid paint and color underneath the bag.
It's a beautiful piece. We're very grateful to have it. It looks very fine on our greyed out studio wall as well. We were thrilled when that was received. One of the things that anybody who ever talks about Gavin Turk and his work talks about you and the questions you raise about value and integrity and of hermetic, what's the phrase, hermetic artistic integrity. And I'm intrigued to know, given the fame that you now have, and as I said in my introduction, you're collected by museums, galleries throughout the world, you're associated with the YBA movement back in the day, how those two things work, how you pick those apart, whether fame or notoriety allows you to do things as an artist that anonymity would prevent, or whether anonymity is a freeing environment in which you can sort of paint or produce work into a vacuum and then just let audiences decide. Can you talk us through how that works with you now, especially in the time of lockdown, which has turned us all into sorts of hermits?
Yeah. I mean, again, I just think that art is about audience and relationship between audience and objects. I mean, I see it as a kind of Venn diagram with you've got one circle which is the artist, one circle which is the audience, and they come together, and in the middle they make the artwork. So the artwork is a sort of like a product of audience and artist, and at some point the artist becomes the audience, and at some point the audience actually becomes the artist. I think without the audience there isn't really an artwork, and so I don't know if you can really make work in a vacuum. I mean, there's this idea of the desert island, like the desert island scenario, and people say, if you go on a desert island, would you make art? And I kind of, my honest answer is like, on the desert island, I think that I just sort of fiddle around, and I don't think that if I didn't have a conception of audience, I think that it wouldn't really be art. And so that, there is a point, and it's a difficult point here, especially if we want to talk about fame or celebrity, because I'm about to say, I think that almost like the more audienced an artwork gets, like the more it almost like qualifies and becomes an artwork, the more it takes part in that conversation. Obviously, there's a point at which, like, when it goes into the sort of like the hyperbole, when it becomes like, dare I use the word, a masterpiece, it obviously then starts spilling out cliche fluff and becomes kind of almost useless again, because it's difficult to. It becomes difficult to grasp again because it becomes unquestionable, and people just assume it. They just go like, oh well, that's a masterpiece. We can't ask questions of that in terms of the relevance of it. It's just we know it's relevant, and we have to just take it on all its various terms and try to kind of like understand it in that way. So if we come back, if we sort of like take ourselves back away from the masterpiece and just simply look at the notion of kind of cultural material and how culture is kind of connects us or makes us, or maybe we can look at art as a point of philosophizing about how much of us is us and how much of us is made by our circumstance. Where do we stop, or where do we start, and culture or our context start? And, just I think in terms of like trying to use art or use culture, on itself, to try and get a sense or an understanding of who we are and what we are and why we are.
I like the way you started that. It sort of put me in mind of a sort of Schrödinger's cat theory of art. If there's no audience, is it a piece of art? If the art is observed, does it change the work of art? Does it change the audience? It's a really nice theory.
Yes.
How much interaction, how much cross-fertilization do you have with other artists? Put the audience to one side for the minute. But in conversations with other artists, given that, of course, we hear the three letters YBA, Young British Artists, and some people would imagine a group of sort of traveling group of artistic nomads who are all firing and sparking off each other. Is there any element of that today, or are you sort of hermited in your own studios, considering stuff, but consuming up by going to galleries, looking at books, looking at two-dimensional images in a way?
I think, I mean, obviously everyone's grown up, moved on, got their own families and doing their own thing, and so there's a point at which like it isn't how it used to be, but I try and keep myself going out and looking at other artists' work and educated in other artists. I mean, there is a sort of temptation, I think, with older artists to just spend too long concentrating on themselves and on their own work. And I think they can slightly disappear up their own selves. For me, it is very much about the discourse. It's very much about sort of putting things out there and trying to sort of see how they look through other people's eyes. And I think it's a bit like, I remember inviting someone who I'd known for quite a long time to come to my house, and they'd never been to my house before. And all of a sudden, when this person was in my house, I started realizing things about, marks on the walls and things about my house, which I had never noticed before. I'd just kind of taken them for granted. And it was like, well, like what's happened is that I'm actually looking at the walls and looking at my house through their eyes. Like I'm sort of like getting myself into the understanding, or my kind of understanding of how they see the world and how they would see my house, if that makes any sense. It's a kind of out of body experience. So it's the closest thing you could get to doing that.
Yeah, no, to me, that makes enormously good sense, Gavin. It's sort of what writers do. They have to step outside in order to look in. So, for example, the reason Bill Bryson, Notes on a Small Island, was such a huge success was that he had to step outside. He was an outsider repackaging Britain for those who live in Britain and getting us to see the things that we haven't noticed about ourselves. Filmmakers I've talked to, from Terry Gilliam to whoever you care to mention, always say the same thing, that any British filmmaker making a film in the States will highlight on the things that they think define America that Americans don't even notice, whether it's a yellow, a checkered taxi cab or something like that. So the things you don't notice in your own home make enormous good sense to me. You teach, if I'm correct, still Professor of Art and Design at Bath Spa University. Is that right?
I've stopped doing that now, only recently.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy, the question I was going to ask you is, did you enjoy teaching? And to pick up on the thing you said earlier, seeing what young artists are doing, are there any names that you want to name check, or that you think are worthy of mention, saying, people might want to have a look at these people coming up?
Yeah, I mean, probably. Yeah, so I'm supposed
Come back to teaching. Did you enjoy teaching?
Did I enjoy teaching? I did enjoy it. I think that it is something. There's definitely something about this idea of thinking about learning and thinking about teaching, or thinking about this idea of work and how all these. Again, it's to do with we're so sort of conceptually sort of closeted. We quite often have such closed ideas about the possibilities of what we're learning or how we're learning it. It can actually stop the process. I think that I really enjoyed my time at art college and sort of understanding a way of thinking about my processes. And I try to, when I teach, I try to help the students to kind of see the way that they're thinking, or the way that I'm hearing the way that they're thinking. So sometimes you might find someone who's got a very kind of specific idea about what they think they're doing, but the work itself looks like something else. Yeah. And there's a bit of a disconnect. And sometimes it's important to kind of reconnect people, certainly at this time when it's possible to do that. I think, like pretty soon they become sort of peer group, they become artists themselves, and then sometimes like they don't need that kind of advice, or they don't want that kind of, they want to take that kind of advice. No, I do enjoy the relationship between me and the students, but I think that one of the problems with our education as well is it's now become such a sort of business. It's now become such a a kind of, you have to do a lot of form filling, and there's so much accountability that it slightly takes the joy out of it slightly.
You were awarded an honorary doctorate in 2010 from the University of East London. A question I've never asked you, and I've never thought to ask you before now, is, having had your original degree withheld, was it subsequently awarded to you? Did you actually get your degree in the end?
No, I haven't been awarded it yet, but I've been in various Royal College exhibitions.
Yeah.
And my slides are in the slide library, and I do get put on by the Royal College. Actually, I do get put on alumni lists. And I think that occasionally I get letters asking if I would donate money to the Royal College, but they haven't actually offered, maybe I haven't donated enough money, but they haven't actually offered to give me my MA certificate yet, no. But
does that sting? Would you accept it?
But actually an honorary doctorate trumps, and professorship as well, trump the MA certificate anyway, so it doesn't matter. I mean, in a way, it might spoil it. And in a way, maybe I should get really sort of churlish and just say, oh no, I don't want it, thanks.
Well, I was going to say,
I've lived quite happily without it for all this time, I don't want it anymore.
If offered, would you accept it, was going to be my question.
I don't know. I mean, it depends. It depends if they're really nice, if they're really kind of nice about it. If they just kind of like go, oh yeah, well, here you go, I might go, oh, well, no thanks. I don't know. And at the same time, I don't really want them to make a big sort of song and dance out of it either. It'd be really awful. But I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't know. Well, I think we'll cross the bridge if that bridge gets built. Or if
whether there's ever a chance, whether you would ever do this, of a sort of redux of Cave. Gavin Turk worked here 89, 1991 and wasn't awarded his MA ever. Whether you could do that.
No. Well, yeah, I mean, to be honest, other people that have been making these plaques, so I keep getting asked if it would be all right if various people make plaques and put my name on various other plaques. And I think there was a plaque on the outside of the Royal College recently when there was a demonstration about working conditions and gender pay inequality, and recently there was a whole sort of like raft of strikes and stuff like that at the Royal College, and I think the blue plaque went up at that point, like to kind of celebrate this moment of dissolution.
Did that put a smile on your face?
Kind of.
Can I ask? Can we take a slight detour? Your partner, in association with your partner Deborah Curtis, you founded a thing called the House of Fairytales. Can we shed a bit of light on that, please? What is it, and what made you start it?
Yeah, I mean, Deborah Curtis is my partner. She's definitely the main driver in it. It came out originally from I think it was from having our own children and just realizing that we were living in Shoreditch at the time, and there just wasn't really a culture that kind of included I think the benefits of what children were able to give to the climate, to the situation, to the environment, like around us. And I think that, you know, from that moment going forward, we realised that that it was really important, necessary to incorporate our artistic backgrounds and our way of thinking, our way of looking, our way of being, to try and keep creative education going for as long as possible, or to really give good quality creative education to children, and not just simply sort of rely on the fact that, oh, kids, they can only see bright blue, bright green, bright red, bright yellow, that actually they can actually see all the different colours in between. That actually, like, that children are actually really sophisticated, and they have huge amounts of potential for imagining the world. I mean, they will, you know, they will have a go at imagining a new colour if you ask them to, and they do it, and they come up with a name for it, and you know, like it gets drummed out of children, that this ability to think laterally, to be imaginative. And I think that, you know, going forwards as well, like on a societal level, we obviously need lateral thinking and creativity to help us to sort of like move the whole kind of society forwards, and to possibly get out of some of the problems that we've gotten ourselves into, namely the one of the ecological problem we're in.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's such a brilliant initiative. Hundreds of artists, performers, actors, writers, philosophers, load of theatrical events, and I think, if memory serves, you've toured the country in a mobile gallery horse box, taking it to everywhere from Crunch to Glastonbury to Tate Modern. It's a brilliant, brilliant initiative, and we'll point to people to that. We're running slightly short on time. There are two more things I want to discuss with you. Can you talk to me through how you approach, and whether you enjoy, whether you love, what the challenges are for public sculptures? And I'm thinking of L'Âge d'Or, the Age of Gold, in the press centre at the Olympic Park, and of course Nail, this beautiful 12-metre sculpture next to St Paul's Cathedral. When commissions like that come dropping through the door, do you dance with joy, or do you clutch your head in your hands and think, this is 6 months of deep thought and a lot of hard work?
No, it's generally it's more kind of, it almost just comes through the process of doing it. I mean, yeah, I mean, I'd say that making public sculptures for me is relatively recent, and it's been an absolute fascination for me, and a great difficulty as well. I mean, if you imagine a sculpture or an artwork which is open all the time, it means that there's obviously lots of times where the sculpture is there and people are not looking, or they're not thinking, or they're not seeing it. That the sculpture disappears. It's like what I was saying about the masterpiece, inverted commas. Like it can't sort of sustain staying on show the whole time. So I've always, but at the same time, it is on show all the time, and it is kind of there doing something quite crucial for the environment, and it is provocative. It is it is a kind of a moment where you can see the high street or see the world in a different way. And yeah, I mean, the process itself is quite often that where there would be a list of artists, a long list, and then there would be a short list, and you'd make a proposal. So it's not quite as simple as like, here's a commission, what are you going to do with it? It generally comes through a sort of like a process of making. So that by the time the work gets made, obviously there are headaches that continue to kind of keep going through the process. But I mean, I have enjoyed, I mean, the large door piece, a large door in a door frame with the door sort of somewhat open, an old panelled door that just sits just it's ajar, so it's 45 degrees open. It's a sort of Magrittean gesture. It's a kind of surreal moment. It's a question of inside and outside. It's kind of it challenges this kind of idea of where do you know, at what point do you stand in order to be inside or outside? Is it, or maybe it is just a frame. Maybe it's just simply just a frame, or it's just a threshold with nothing else. So it's like the moment when something becomes something else. So it's like a portrait of now, but also it's like a portrait of an egg, like a door and a door frame. It's like an egg. It's like it's all one great big door for the chick about to come out, or all one great big wall. And then the nail sculpture, again, like maybe the nail is the first thing you reach for when you go to put a picture on the wall. So again, the nail is a kind of a frame. It's also like a kind of surreal thing, like an enlarged nail sticking out of the ground in a brand new glass and mastic Jean Nouvel development in a sort of like state-of-the-art shops and offices block in the city of London, just behind St Paul's Cathedral. So just behind St Paul's Cathedral, you've got a large nail sticking out of the ground. There's a kind of religious connotation to it. Yeah. There's a kind of, it looks a bit like a flag, like a kind of a flagpole, or maybe it suggests the idea of the sort of invisible wood, the invisible material that the nail was holding down, as kind of that has now disappeared. So it almost talks about the negative space. The material that the nail was trapping is gone. I mean, someone sent me a message at one point, like a year ago or something, saying, I go to work at One New Change and I go past your sculpture every day, but I went past this morning and it was gone. What's happened? And I was really confused. So I actually phoned a friend and got them to go and check, and they said, no, it's still there. So I sent her back a message and said, no, I think you'll find it's still there. And she said, oh, yes, it is. Yes, I obviously forgot to look.
No.
It's really weird. I think she just wanted to communicate with me.
It's possible.
Nice.
Zadie Smith once told me that she wished, after she's written a first draft of a new book, she could put it in a desk drawer and leave it there for 20 years and then read it later as a reader and not as the author. And given what you just said about nail and forgetting to look, have you ever allowed yourself, does it ever work like that you can go and revisit one of your works in a gallery or in a public space and see it only as an observer rather than as the artist? Has that worked ever? Does that work?
No, there's definitely a point where the art disappears, where it becomes like almost like the property of the museum. So recently I went and visited some work of mine in the Tate, and you know, like it's gone. It's sort of gone from me. Like
Okay.
I couldn't touch it. I can't sort of go up to it and start fiddling around with it. It's gone. It's out there. It's you never quite get that pure separation from it. I mean, unfortunately, you need that proper Alzheimer's kind of like cut off to really kind of go back and go like, that's nothing to do with me. But there is a disjunct, and I think that it's interesting the way that when you go to revisit work that you made like, let's say 20 years ago, there is a point like where you learn stuff about yourself. I think you can see it from some sort of distance. It's a bit like our story with going to visit something with a friend. I mean, you know, it's interesting the way that in this conversation we're sort of touring around this, again, the frame of art. Like, what's the frame of it? What makes an artwork, or at what point does an artwork become something else? Where does it stop and where does it start? And we're kind of starting to delineate time and context, like the audience, like what are these kind of what are all the constituent parts that need to be thrown in the air, and somewhere in the middle of those things an artwork gets made.
We'll let people watching this come to their own conclusions on some of those rather profound questions. You have a number of books, which I mentioned, not least, this is not a book about Gavin Turk, and various other works. If you were to point, we're going to have a buy the book button at the bottom of this screen.
Okay.
If you were to point people to one of your books that you think you are closest to right now, that you are still a fan of, what would you like people to turn to get a picture of Gavin Turk and what you produce and why?
I mean, I still would ask people to have a look at the monograph. I mean, I know it's a big black, I haven't got one here in the studio now, but I know it's a big tome. It's like 2.5 kilos of book. You know, obviously when you finish reading through it, you can put it, you can use it as a doorstop. I mean, I have a kind of a little story about that, where the book was in this hotel dining room or living room, and I was leaving the hotel, and I met Ai Weiwei, and Ai Weiwei, I introduced myself to Ai Weiwei, and then he said, "Oh, you're in there," and I was like, "I'm in the living room, in the other room. No, I'm Gavin," and he was like going, "No, you're Gavin Turk in the other room," and I was like, "No, I think I'm in oh, is there another Gavin Turk here?" And then I realized that he had just put down my book, which was in this black book, which was in the living room, and then he said, "Oh, I just know your book. I have your book. I've been looking at your book, and I really enjoyed reading this, and I didn't know all this work that you'd made." And then I said, "Oh, well, I've actually got another work here, which is an animatronic. It's called Rosie Lee, and she's a fortune-telling gypsy, an animatronic fortune-telling gypsy. Come and see her." So we went round to behind the living room to where this animatronic sculpture was, and he put some money in, and and after a sort of like a little ball. Crystal ball glows and the eyes light up, and then like the hands move and the head goes like this, and then a little card spits out, and it has various things on it, and one of them is it has your magical animal, and his magical animal was a panda, and I was like, "A panda, see, panda." He said, no, you don't understand. For me, this is super important, because panda is what we call the secret police.
I'm delighted to learn that from your Rosie Lee, Ai Weiwei's magical animal is a panda. How fascinating. You're working on eggs. Last question from me, and then we have to wrap because we're very shy on time. You're interested in eggs at the minute. Can you talk us through this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always interested in eggs, and I've made over I think I've probably made over 700 pieces which incorporate eggs. It originally, I think, starts from that sort of psychoanalytical Freudian surrealist point. Like, almost like the egg is like a signature of surrealism. It's like a dream object, but then at the same time, it's like this pure form, this kind of reduction of form, like Brancusi or various minimalist artists. Then there's this kind of sense that, and I particularly concentrate on birds that are farmed. And then, you know, we can go historically. The eggs are the egg tempera paints. They were the original paint form. We can look at this sort of the puzzles and the riddles, which came first, the chicken or the egg, we can look at this idea of the architectural thing with it being all door, and this idea of inside and outside, the curving space, the creation myths. There's so many creation myths that start with eggs. I think that it seems that every kind of culture has, like, if you're going back, like a point like where an egg appears and almost like starts the process of life. So it's not actually the Big Bang, is it? It's actually the big egg.
I like it. Professor, Doctor, Honorary Doctor Gavin Turk, Sans MA. It's been so lovely talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us here at Lockdown LitFest.
Hey, I didn't even get to talk about all my books I've been reading.
Well, we'll talk about those another time. We'll put the picture of your to read book pile up on social media.
Okay, good.
Please give our best to Deborah and the people you're locked down with, and many, many thanks from all of us here at Lockdown LitFest, Gavin. It's been a real pleasure to chat to you.
Brilliant.
Ladies and gentlemen, there we go with Gavin Turk. Fantastic chat, and of course a wonderful piece of art over my shoulder, which Gavin has very kindly gifted to us. We hope you've enjoyed this event. We hope you stay safe, keep well, look after yourselves. We'll see you soon. Cheerio.